especially during this transition period. I come to the issue of terrorism from a very unique point of view, because I not only speak about terrorism as a terrorism analyst and an expert on what's happening with global Islamic terrorism, but also as an eyewitness to terror. I come from Lebanon, which used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. Many people don't realize that, especially the younger new generation. Beirut used to be Paris of the Middle East. We, the Christians, were the majority. We were open-minded, we were fair, we were tolerant. We had open border policy. We welcomed everybody into our country because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Middle East. We had built the best universities in the Arabic world. Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities because we had built the best universities. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had built the best economy in the heart of the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. Lebanon prospered. Lebanon grew. But sadly, we had an element within our society growing that we, the Christians, did not pay attention to. Not only the Muslim population in our country grew in numbers simply because of the way they multiply, but with the influx of the Palestinians out of Jordan when King Hussein kicked them out, came to Lebanon, the majority of them were Muslims, and that's what tipped the scale. And the Muslims declared jihad on the Christians. That's when my 9/11 happened to me back in 1975. That's when the Muslims bombed my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded as they shouted, Allahu Akbar. My only crime was that I was a Christian living in a Christian town. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And while in a hospital and after many surgeries and laying down in a hospital bed with needles in both arms, IV bag in one and blood bag in another, and I would look at my parents and ask them, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims want to kill us because they consider us infidels. That was a very tough lesson for a child who's 10 years old, not knowing why someone can hate me so much without ever knowing me. I ended up living in a bomb shelter with my parents underground for 7 years of my life, from the age of 10 till the age of 17. Without any electricity, any water, and very little food. To get some food, we would crawl out under the bombs because the Muslims surrounded us and they were raining bombs on us. And we would dig out grass and dandelions and different vegetation that grew around our bomb shelter so we can eat. To get some water, just the simple things we take for granted here in America. Because the snipers who surrounded us to kill us and shooting at us, my mother and I had to crawl in a ditch under snipers' bullets for hours. And what should be a 5-minute walk used to take us hours to get to a nearby spring. So my mother used to use her stocking on top of the gallon of water to catch all the rocks and all the worms and all the junk so we can drink the water. Every time before we left our bomb shelter to get the water, we would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead, just to get a drink of water. I remember this went on for 2-3 years and us thinking the world is going to wake up, the world is going to pay attention. But no one paid attention. I remember at age 13 years old, dressing in my Sunday best because we had gotten a word. A friend of ours from the militia stopped by and he said, we just heard that they're going to kill us tonight. We're going to have a major attack. We heard it on the radio, on the chatter, and we don't think we're going to be able to resist. So if we die, I wish you a merciful death. And he gave me a big hug and he left. And I remember at age 13, dressing in my Easter dress, my Sunday best, because I wanted to look pretty when they come to kill me, knowing that after they slaughter me, there will be no one to bury me. And I remember crying, begging my mother, I'm only 13 years old, I don't want to die. And there was nothing my mother could say to me, except, if they come to kill us tonight, you just run towards Israel and you never look back. We'll create a distraction, you just run. You see, at that time, the whole world was asleep and no one paid attention except for the state of Israel, who understood what was at stake and understood what the Christians were dealing with, because Israel has been the front line of the war against terror. But no one in the world was paying attention, because as long as Jewish blood was shed on the streets of Jerusalem and Christian blood was being shed on the streets of Beirut, nobody in the world gave a darn. It wasn't until September 11th, when the world woke up and realized we are under attack. Our civilization is under attack. They are here now. Israel worked with the Christians in Lebanon in trying to expel the radical Islamists out of our country. By 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon, Lebanon had 11 terrorist organizations, Islamic organizations, operating out of Lebanon, including the PLO. Israel tried to work with the Christian Lebanese in expelling the radical Islamists, including Yasser Arafat, and helping the Lebanese take back and save their democracy. You see, we are a republic, very much like the United States, contrary to every other Arabic country surrounding us, where you can identify every country with one man or one royal family. It's a one-man regime, with the exception of the State of Israel and Lebanon being a republic. No one in the world paid attention. After Israel invaded Lebanon, we came out to rebuilding our lives. I ended up moving to Israel in 1984 and becoming a news anchor for World News in the Middle East. And as I reported on world events, where I was exposed to world information that was not filtered through the Arabic propaganda filters that Arabs are oblivious to. And I started connecting the dots as I reported on terrorist activities happening around the world. I was news anchor in the 80s, from 1984 till 1989. And that's when we started seeing a rise of terrorist activities around the world. And I started realizing that no matter where the terrorist activity or the terrorist bombing happened to take place, there was something in common. The name of the perpetrators were always Muslims: Ahmed, Muhammad, Hussein, Ali. The name of the victims were always Westerners, Christians and Jews: Terry Waite, Terry Anderson, Colonel Higgins, the Achille Lauro, the TWA, the Pan Am flights. I can go on and on. And I started realizing that what I used to think was a regional problem between a majority Muslim Middle East trying to kill and expel the minority Christians and Jews had become a worldwide problem. But the world was not paying attention. Under the banner of Islam, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, there is no God greater than Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. The Muslims murdered children in Israel, massacred Christians in Lebanon, killed Copts in Egypt, Assyrians in Syria, Armenians in Turkey, Hindus in India, and expelled over 900,000 Jews out of Arab land. All that was done before they ever turned their eyes to the United States or to the West. So today, when you hear people talk about the radical minority, it wasn't a radical minority that expelled the Jews out of all their homes in the Arabic nations. It wasn't a radical minority that massacred 2 million Armenians in Turkey. This was all approved by the governments. It wasn't a radical minority that kicked and killed and expelled the Copts in Egypt. It wasn't a radical minority that kicked and expelled the Assyrians out of Syria. It was governments doing that. Today we hear about Islam and we hear about the Muslims. And yes, the majority of Muslims are peace-loving Muslims. If we have today 1.2 billion Muslims in the world, 1.2 billion. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The radicals are only a minority, about 15 to 25% worldwide. That 15 to 25% translates to 180 million to 300 million radicals, 300 million Muhammad Attas ready to strap bombs on their bodies, walk into this building and blow us all up to smithereens in the name of Allah. Now, that is as big as the United States of America. That is still a minority when you look at the larger picture. So what we have almost 1 billion moderate Muslims in the world. At this point, they are truly irrelevant. And this is what we need to focus on. The only group that matters is the radical minority that's trying to kill us. When you look at Nazi Germany, when we study history, not all Germans were Nazis. Most Germans wanted to live in peace. They didn't, mind. They didn't think anything is happening, and they didn't want to get involved. It was the radical minority that drove the world into war. As a result of our war because of Nazi Germany, the world lost 60 million lives. And remember, we didn't have nuclear bombs back then, nor biological bombs. 60 million lives were lost as a result. 14 million